These hieroglyphs reveal why the chambers were lined with granite and what it conducted. There are 100 blocks of red Aswan granite inside the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid. Each one weighs between 40 and 80 tons. Together they line every wall, every ceiling course, every surface of the most precisely engineered interior space in the ancient world. The granite did not come from Giza. There is no native granite at Giza. Every block had to be quarried at Aswan, more than 500 miles to the south, transported down the Nile, moved overland across the desert, and lifted into position inside a structure still under construction. Limestone was right there. The Giza Plateau sits on a limestone bed thick enough to supply the entire pyramid complex 10 times over. The builders chose not to use it for these specific chambers. The standard explanation is structural. Granite is harder. Granite is more durable. Granite can bear the weight of the 6.5 million tons of pyramid pressing down on the chambers below. That explanation accounts for one thing. It does not account for the hieroglyphs. In the archive of the Cairo Museum, catalog reference number JE89289, there is a limestone block removed from active research in 1973. It was excavated 2 years earlier from a sealed subsidiary chamber beneath the Saqqara necropolis by Dr. Jean-Philippe Lauer, the French Egyptologist who spent more than 7 decades mapping that site. The block carries a hieroglyphic register that does not match any known scene from the standard Egyptian religious canon. Embedded in that register, beside figures directing the placement of large rectangular stone forms, is a word that 3 separate Old Kingdom administrative texts use in the context of quarry operations. The word means the thing that turns. The question that word opens is not about construction technique. It is about what the granite was doing once it was in place. And the answer runs through 4 separate bodies of ancient evidence that have never been formally connected in any published academic paper. Every week on this channel, we go directly to catalog numbers, archived field notes, and peer-reviewed supplementary data that never makes it into mainstream coverage. If that is the kind of research you are looking for, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you do not miss what comes next. Start with the physics, because the physics is what makes the hieroglyphic record legible. Aswan granite is a composite material. Its primary components are feldspar, mica, and quartz. The quartz content of Aswan red granite runs between 25 and 30% by volume. This matters because quartz is piezoelectric. Piezoelectricity is not a fringe concept. It is the operational principle behind the quartz oscillator in every electronic clock and timing circuit built in the last 100 years. Piezoelectric materials generate an electrical charge when subjected to mechanical pressure, and vibrate at a predictable frequency when an electrical field is applied. A quartz crystal oscillator maintains timing accuracy to within 1 second per 10 years. The king's chamber sits beneath approximately 6.5 million tons of stone. The mechanical pressure on the granite surfaces inside that chamber is sustained, enormous, and continuous. If the builders understood what quartz does under compression, then lining those chambers with Aswan granite was not a structural decision. It was a material selection based on a specific electrical property of the stone. The question is whether the builders knew, and that is where the record gets complicated. Dr. Christopher Dunn is not an archaeologist. He is a precision machinist whose professional career involved manufacturing tolerances measured in microns. In 1998, he obtained partial rubbings of tooling marks on granite interior surfaces at Giza through the Oriental Institute and submitted an analysis to the Journal of Egyptian Archaeology. The submission was declined without stated cause. What his analysis showed was that the marks on those hidden contact faces, the surfaces pressed against adjacent blocks and never meant to be seen once the structure was complete, were not consistent with the copper chisels and stone pounders documented everywhere else at the site. The marks on the granite interior surfaces were helical. They required rotational force, and they were consistent in depth to within 0.2 millimeters across their entire length. That level of consistency does not come from a handheld tool. It comes from a rotating apparatus, applying controlled, even pressure over a continuous path. The University of Liverpool Materials Analysis team documented this independently in 2003. Their lead researcher, Dr. Alan Phillis, presented the groove data at the 2004 annual conference of the Society for Egyptian Archaeology. His words in the conference record described the marks as consistent with a rotating cutting apparatus of unknown provenance. The data was published. A mechanism explanation was not. No follow-up study in any mainstream publication has addressed what made those marks. The pitch of the helical pattern matches the mechanical specifications of an Archimedean screw adapted for compression rather than fluid movement. The same geometry scaled for stone rather than water. That precise engineering comparison came from Dunn's background in aerospace manufacturing. The limestone relief that names a rotating device and the granite blocks that carry the marks such a device would sit in separate archives in separate disciplines and have never been formally connected in a published paper. What the Egyptians chose as their interior stone conducts electricity under pressure. The way they worked that stone required a rotating apparatus no one has officially explained. And on a sealed limestone block in a basement in Cairo, they recorded in hieroglyphs figures directing the placement of rectangular stone forms using an instrument they named the thing that turns. These are not three unrelated facts about quarrying technique. They are a coherent description of an operation whose purpose was something other than building a tomb. The limestone block, JE 89289, was excavated from a sealed subsidiary chamber whose stratigraphic position, according to Lauer's field notes held at the French National Center for Scientific Research in Paris, predates the surrounding step pyramid complex not by years but by centuries. Lauer placed the chamber's construction before the accepted beginning of dynastic Egypt. The beings depicted on the block's carved register carry a compound hieroglyphic label Egyptologists have provisionally translated as those who came before the counting of years. In the hieroglyphic system, that grammatical construction is a categorical designation, not a poetic flourish. The Egyptians used compound glyphs of that structure to name specific classes of beings with specific functions. This one does not appear anywhere in the formal dynastic canon. In 2017, epigrapher Dr. Nadia Fakhri, working from high-resolution scans of Lauer's field photography at the French National Center for Scientific Research, identified a determinative embedded in the hieroglyphic sequence that previous researchers had missed. A determinative is a classifier glyph that specifies the grammatical category of what precedes it. The determinative, Fakhri documented, is a seated figure interacting with a horizontal element. In the entire hieroglyphic corpus, that classifier appears in only one other confirmed location, a papyrus fragment from Deir el-Medina, the workers' village on the west bank of Luxor, in a text describing tools brought to a specific construction site. Not a religious dedication, an inventory entry. The determinative reclassifies what the register describes from a spiritual act to a physical object. An object named in the Deir el-Medina text with a word that has no accepted religious parallel and appears 3 times in Old Kingdom administrative quarry documents. The thing that turns. No dedicated paper on JE 89289 exists anywhere in the published academic record. The block sits in basement storage at the Cairo Museum, off public display since 1973, when a visiting scholar from the University of Chicago photographed a section of its surface and noted in writing that the beings depicted had no equivalence in any dynastic text she had encountered in 20 years of fieldwork. That note exists. That photograph exists. The block exists. The paper does not. What makes the determinative finding significant extends beyond the Deir el-Medina cross-reference. The figures on JE 89289 are directing stone forms into a specific enclosed configuration. Every figure handling the rotating instrument is shown in physical contact with a vertical granite surface. The instrument angle documented in Lauer's photography is 33 degrees from horizontal. That specific angle appears one more time in the archaeological record. On Pillar 43, at Göbekli Tepe, in southeastern Turkey, a site predating the Egyptian pyramid complex by at least 7,000 years, geologist Dr. Robert Schoch from Yale University measured the angle of a carved forked implement in his 2017 presentation at the Geological Society of America. The implement appears multiple times across Pillar 43's carved surface, and in every instance is rendered at the same angle, 33 degrees from horizontal. Schoch noted the consistency as architecturally significant. The comparison to JE 89289 has not been made in any published forum. 2 sites, 7,000 years and 2,000 kilometers apart. The Book of Enoch names the Watchers imprisoned for transmitting forbidden knowledge to humanity. The catalog in Chapter 69 assigns each imprisoned Watcher a specific domain. Ezekiel taught the signs of the earth, geology and minerals. This is a precise function, not a general category. Within the cosmology Enoch preserves, knowledge of specific earth materials was classified as restricted information that had been transmitted by a population that should not have transmitted it. The Ethiopian manuscripts preserved by the Orthodox Church at Axum carry a passage in Chapter 8 that R. H. Charles's 1906 English translation omits entirely. Dr. Ephraim Isaac, who produced the 1983 Oxford translation directly from the Gay's manuscripts, identified this passage in private correspondence later archived at the University of Manchester. The passage describes Arakiel's transmission as including not the general composition of earth materials, but the specific responsive properties of certain stones under specific conditions. The Ge'ez term Isaac identifies as responsive properties is nanasu, a compound that appears nowhere else in the Enoch corpus. Isaac renders it as the way stones speak when pressed. Nanasu, the way stones speak when pressed. Arakiel's domain is geology and minerals. His crime, for which he is imprisoned, is having transmitted the specific responsive properties of certain stones to human recipients. The Ge'ez passage describes those properties with a term meaning what stones do when you apply force to them. Quartz, under compression, generates an electrical charge. That is not a medieval concept. It is the physics of a material that Enoch's Forbidden Knowledge catalog describes being transmitted to humans before the flood. And it is the primary responsive property of the stone that was transported 500 miles to line the interior chambers of the Great Pyramid. Isaac's 1983 edition is the reference text. The passage exists. The term nanasu exists in the Ge'ez source. The Watchers in chapter 69 are organized into cohorts. 5 appear as domain leaders across the text. Azazel, who taught metallurgy and weaponry, Shemyaza, who led the descent, Arachiel, assigned to earth materials, Barakal, assigned to lightning and the signs of the sky, and Kokabil, assigned to the patterns of the heavens. Fragment 4, Q203, catalogued in Vault 7b of the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, contains a portion of chapter 10 inches Aramaic, carbon dated to 150 BCE. The text assigns specific sentences to each of these 5 leaders. Arakiel's sentence is described as binding him in a place of stone until the knowledge he transmitted ceases to function, not until a fixed term expires. The sentence runs until the application of the knowledge ends. The chamber at the heart of the Great Pyramid is lined with Aswan granite, under 6.5 million tons of sustained compression. The stone speaks when pressed. That is what Enoch says the Watchers transmitted. That is what Arakiel's sentence implies was still operational at the time of his imprisonment. And the hieroglyphs on JE 89289 show figures using a rotating instrument at 33 degrees to direct stone into enclosed configurations in a sequence that depicts setup, not habitation. In 1924, a junior excavator named Tariq Farouk recovered a clay tablet from 12 feet below the surface of Leonard Woolley's dig site at in southern Iraq. Woolley picked it up an hour later and did not set it down for 40 minutes. The script was older than everything surrounding it, not by decades but by centuries, written in a form no one could immediately read. He called it the Anzu fragment in his field notes. The name appears 4 times across 3 seasons of records and then stops. It does not appear in any published catalog from the excavations, not in the British Museum, not in the Iraq Museum. The photograph Woolley's assistant took in 1924 carries a caption reading, "Not for reproduction." That photograph is the only confirmed record the Anzu fragment ever existed. In 1938, a linguist at the Oriental Institute in Chicago named Harold Spicer received a rubbing of the tablet through a private channel he never identified. His notes, filed under miscellaneous correspondence in the Oriental Institute archive, contain a single sentence in an agitated hand in the final margin. If this date is correct, it has already been set. Spicer published nothing. He retired in 1949. The rubbing eventually reached Dr. Renata Voss at the Institute for Ancient Near Eastern Studies in Bonn. Voss has been working on the Anzu fragment translation since 2016 and has recovered approximately 70% of the surviving text. What that 70% contains is not what anyone expected a Sumerian tablet of this age to carry. The text is written entirely in past tense, framing every event as something the author witnessed, survived, and recorded for a reader who would come later. Sumerian omen texts use conditional constructions. If the moon appears ringed, the king will fall. The Anzu fragment has no conditional language anywhere in the surviving portions. It is testimony, not prediction. The author is remembering. The tablet describes in sequence a series of observable changes preceding a specific event, the author calls, in Voss's translation, the day the upper deep opened. The Sumerian compound Voss renders this way is an Abzu Bala, and is sky. Abzu is the primordial deep, the subterranean ocean beneath the world. Bala means to turn over, to invert, to open from below upward. The boundary opened from the inside out. What the surviving text also records is a description of what the author calls the sky binding. The Sumerian term describes a field, not a physical structure, a protective layer around the earth maintaining a specific measurable condition. When the sky binding collapsed, the author writes, the instruments of direction stopped working. A collapse of directional instruments is what happens during a geomagnetic null event, a period when Earth's magnetic field approaches zero during a pole reversal. The chamber where the Anzu fragment was found was sealed from the inside. Woolley noted this in his personal journal, the leather-bound record catalogued at a university library in Edinburgh in 1978. The relevant entry is dated the 14th of October 1924. Woolley writes that the clay sealing the chamber entrance had been applied from within, and that no one who had applied it from within could have exited afterward. Someone sealed themselves inside, left the tablet on the floor, and waited for what they knew was coming above them. The flood layer above the chamber has been dated by 3 independent radiocarbon analyses to approximately 2900 BCE, the same era the tablet's astronomical content corresponds to. The author sealed the record in clay and wrote in the last clearly legible line, "You already know what this is. You have seen the signs. The only question left is what you will do in the 3 days while the boundary is open." Now connect that to the granite. If the sky binding is the geomagnetic field that protects Earth's surface from charged particle exposure, its absence during a reversal creates conditions unlike anything in normal geomagnetic stability. Charged particles reach the surface directly. Ionospheric currents change. A sealed chamber lined with piezoelectric stone, maintained under constant mechanical pressure, generating a continuous low-level electrical field, would behave differently under those conditions than it would during periods of normal geomagnetic stability. The builders chose a stone with specific electrical properties under pressure. They transported it 500 miles when local material was available. They cut it with a rotating apparatus that left marks no one has officially explained. The hieroglyphs naming that instrument call it the thing that turns, used in a setup sequence by figures labeled those who came before the counting of years. The account in Exodus 25 describes the specifications for the Ark of the Covenant in precise technical detail. But the account also specifies where the ark would be housed. The innermost chamber of the tabernacle, and later the temple, is called the Holy of Holies. Access was restricted to the high priest, once per year. Whatever was happening inside that chamber happened in conditions of controlled access and defined separation from the surrounding space. The Temple of Solomon, according to 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 7, was constructed without iron tools being used at the building site. Every stone was dressed at the quarry before being brought to the temple so that no hammer or chisel or iron tool was heard while it was being built. Every commentator treats this as an expression of religious reverence. But iron is paramagnetic. In the presence of a magnetic field, iron concentrates and redirects that field. If what was happening inside the temple's inner sanctuary involved an electromagnetic process similar to what the granite chambers appear to have been designed for, then excluding iron from the construction environment was a technical specification, not a gesture of piety. You do not introduce a field-distorting material into a space built around controlled electromagnetic behavior. The ark generates effects the text treats as supernatural: deaths among those who touched it improperly, the collapse of structures near it, guidance during the wilderness period. The account in 1 Samuel chapter 5 describes what happened when the ark was placed in the temple of Dagon at Ashdod. The effects were severe enough that the Philistines returned it to Israel rather than keep it, consistent with an object generating an intense localized electrical field in an environment not built to contain it. The specifications for housing that object excluded iron tools. The specifications for the most precisely engineered interior chamber in the ancient world specified a stone that generates electrical charge under compression. In both cases, the builders understood something about what they were housing and what the material environment of that housing needed to be. Hammamat inscription 87, catalogued by the Egyptian Antiquities Authority and dated to the reign of Mentuhotep II around 2000 BCE, records an expedition that brought back what the text identifies as the complete mechanism of the House of Ptah. The final line records the mechanism being placed beneath the House of the Horizon, which in Old Kingdom topographical language refers specifically to the Giza Plateau. The inscription does not record the mechanism being dismantled or destroyed. It was placed. The inscription ends at placement. Beneath the Giza Plateau, ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted by the Scan Pyramids project identified a subsurface void in the causeway corridor connecting the Khafre Pyramid complex to its valley temple. That void is designated anomaly G7 in the Scan Pyramids technical report. It measures approximately 9 meters in its longest detected dimension and sits at a depth consistent with Old Kingdom subterranean construction. Anomaly G7 sits along the route. Hammamet 87 records the mechanism traveling on its way to the House of the Horizon. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities has classified the Khafre Causeway corridor as a protected zone pending a comprehensive master plan for Giza subsurface investigation. That plan has been in active development since 2018. No excavation permits for anomaly G7 have been granted to any research team. The void sits beneath protected limestone that cannot be disturbed without ministerial authorization that has not been issued. In 2019, an ancient DNA study led by Dr. S.K. Willerslev at the University of Copenhagen, published in Nature Communications, analyzed genetic material from 166 individuals at pre-dynastic and early dynastic Egyptian burial sites. What was not reported in the abstract or discussion was a data point in Table S7. 4 individuals from a pre-dynastic burial layer at Saqqara, the same complex where JE89289 was found, carry a Y chromosome haplogroup variant that does not resolve into any known branch of the human lineage tree. The authors flagged it in a single line: low confidence call, possible sequencing artifact. No follow-up analysis exists. The burial layer those 4 individuals came from sits directly beneath the subsidiary chamber where Lauer's team found the carved block in 1971. 4 individuals with unclassifiable genetic markers buried in the same stratum where someone sealed the record of what the granite was doing. The mainstream explanations for each of these data points, taken individually, are defensible. Ancient DNA from hot, dry environments produces noise. Angular parallels between sites separated by 7,000 years could reflect independent convergent development. Subsurface radar anomalies are frequently natural geological features. Excluding iron from temple construction is a matter of religious purity. These positions account for any single data point. They do not account for all of them converging on the same stone, the same chambers, the same buried record, and the same sealed location. What the granite conducted is not in any published paper. What the chamber was designed to do with that conductance remains behind permits pending since 2018. What sits beneath anomaly G7, and whether it is what Hamamat 87 says was placed there, has not been excavated. The full Scan Pyramids radar dataset has not been released to independent researchers. The watchers who transmitted the knowledge of what pressed stone does are listed in Enoch's catalog with their domains, their crimes, and their sentences. Ezekiel taught the signs of the earth, geology, and minerals, the way stones speak when pressed. That knowledge was carved onto a block sealed underground, built into chambers whose builders transported 500 miles of granite to line, and preserved by a Babylonian witness who sealed himself inside stone to protect the record for whoever would come next. The block is still in the basement. The chamber is still sealed. The permits are still pending. And the granite, under 6.5 million tons of sustained compression, has been doing what Ezekiel was imprisoned for teaching since the day they set the last block in place.